Thank you so much to both of you for being willing to spend this time. I know it's such a busy month, a busy week for you with lots of traveling. So I want to just show my appreciation, share my appreciation for the time. So many lessons here on, morality, humanity, leadership. So what I'm going to do first is basically what we did before is I'm going to share my video and then just really open it up for the two of you to fill in the blanks, and I will ask questions here and there, but I just want this to be a space for you to share your story. I'm taking some time this month to honor the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War, especially to tell stories for April 29th and 30th, 1975, the Fall of Saigon. These were the final hours of U.S. involvement in Vietnam and the beginning of a new life for thousands of Vietnamese citizens who fled their homeland. And this is a story I've heard over the years that never fails to move me, not because it's tragic, but because of the incredible humanity, compassion, and courage that was shown on the USS Midway during Operation Frequent Wind. Operation Frequent Wind remains the largest helicopter evacuation in history, as the U.S. Navy carried out a 30-hour mission to evacuate Vietnamese allies and civilians from Saigon to the carrier. Towards the end of the operation, a small two-seat Cessna, a bird dog, was seen flying overhead. The pilot of that bird dog made a few attempts at dropping a note onto the carrier. Finally, one landed on the deck with the message: "Can you please move the helicopters to the other side of the ship so I can land on your runway? I can fly 1 hour more. We have enough time to move. Please rescue me. Major Buang Lee, wife, and 5 child." Captain Lawrence Chambers, commanding officer of the Midway, was immediately informed of this situation, and he had to make a quick decision. He knew the bird dog could not land with all the helicopters on deck, even if he had moved them. He also knew that family would be lost at sea if he didn't take action. So despite protocol, Captain Chambers made the decision to save this family. He ordered his crew to push off 4 Hueys and 1 Chinook to make room for an attempted landing aboard the Midway, a seemingly impossible task for a small airplane. But the plan worked. After a couple passes, Major Buang Lee landed safely. In an interview with KPBS, USS Midway Air Boss Vern Jumper remembers this story. After he landed, the major and his wife jumped out of the cockpit, pulled the backseat forward, and out-tumbled all these little kids. 5 little kids they had. She was holding a baby in her arms when he landed. When he landed, my flight deck crew and all the other guys who were working on the flight deck in the squadrons and the ship's company ran out there. And they were hooping and hollering and making so much noise. They were so proud, so glad they saved this family. By the end of the mission, the USS Midway crew pushed more than $10 million worth of helicopters and equipment off deck, all to help evacuate over 3,100 refugees, including this one family. Major Buang Lee and his family went on to start a new life in Florida as U.S. citizens. In 1989, they had the opportunity to reunite with Admiral Lawrence Chambers, who honorably and heroically served in the U.S. Navy from 1952 to 1984, retiring as a Rear Admiral. The USS Midway was decommissioned in 1992. She is now a museum ship in San Diego, California. One aircraft that was not pushed overboard that day was Major Lee's bird dog. The crew kept it. It is now on display at the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. This historical story is an example of what leadership looks like when guided by empathy, not ego or protocol. It's also a reminder that doing the right thing may come at a cost, but worth the risk. And it shows us that how in moments of chaos, acts of courage and humanity can change the course of someone's life. And as a Vietnamese refugee myself, I want to thank Captain Larry Chambers and the crew of the USS Midway for your humanity, your courage and kindness, and saving the lives of so many South Vietnamese families. So we were connected by Jean Moran, and when I got on a call with Mrs. Chambers, the stories, I thought I told a pretty good story in 3 minutes, but so many stories. Thank you so much and it means a lot to me that you watched that and that you thought it was fairly accurate too.
For 50 years, that's about as accurate as you're ever going to get.
Looking back, what stands out for you? Or maybe this is a good question. What did I miss in that video?
Well, you didn't miss anything. The Admiral was yelling at me, telling me to tell Major Lee to ditch, but we didn't have any radio communications. We got a person from the embassy who spoke very good English and very good Vietnamese, and put her in the control tower to try to talk to him. But on the two emergency frequencies, he didn't have a radio up. So the
Mm.
only thing we could signal him with, most airfields have what we call an Aldous lamp, and you can either give them a green light or a red light or a caution light. And I mean, that's all aviators worldwide understand. If I get a red light, that says I can't come aboard. If I get a green light, it's up to you. It's your chance. Go for it. We had 45 knots of wind over the deck. And
They made 45 knots of wind. They didn't have any wind over the deck, really, because they were just sitting in the water with helicopters taking off and landing. You don't need wind to stop helicopters. They go straight up and down. But he had the chief engineer move the ship such that he got some wind to help Major Lee stop his plane.
Well, the weather that day was 15 knots, gusting to 18, and light rain. And I mean, but visibility was excellent, at least 10 miles, and so he didn't have any trouble finding us, and
Right.
we didn't have any trouble seeing him. And but before we got his note, we had glasses on him, and we could see that there was somebody sitting in a back seat holding what looks like a baby in arms.
Oh my gosh.
And from the baggage compartment, we could see one head sticking out. So just visually, we saw 4 souls on board, but we didn't see the other kids that were in the baggage.
They were too little.
They were too little. There was total chaos.
Oh, I'm sure.
There were helicopters that were running back and forth. We didn't have the ability to refuel them quickly, and many of the Hueys.
But they weren't your helicopters, the little ones.
They had skids, and so the flight deck has a non-skid coating on it, great for braking action, but not so good on hands and knees if you fall. And if you're trying to push some helicopters over the side that don't have any wheels, that's a monumental task.
Yeah.
So in preparation for the operation, my chief engineer made I don't know how many, but 6 or 8 sets of wheels. So you could rock the Huey by the tail, put the wheels under them, and then we could move them around on deck. If we hadn't had that, we couldn't have made a ready deck.
Amazing.
For Major Lee.
And that wasn't intended to push the Hueys off. That was just intended to move.
Those wheels gave us the ability to park the airplanes once they were abandoned. And they didn't abandon them in Saigon. They abandoned them on all the vessels out there. So it turns out I wasn't the only vessel. Midway wasn't the only vessel that had pushed helicopters over the side. And only I did it on a grand scale. You don't need to change your pitch, but I pushed a lot more over the side than you.
How many?
Well, I believe like you're no longer able to be court-martialed for any of this, so we can just get rid of it. Right?
No, I mean, why would they want to try to court-martial a 96-year-old? They don't even have to shoot me. All they got to do is blow at me real hard, and it's all over. Right?
People think about that time. Of course, it was hectic. It was hectic. It was chaotic. It was tragic, and there's so much beauty and good, right, that happened that day. And this story is one of the highlights. So I mean, after talking to Mrs. Chambers, hearing about, you were the first Black man to have the command of a U.S. carrier, and you were only 1 month into your command. Is that correct when this happened?
Actually, 28 days was.
So not even a whole full month.
But you still have to do what you think is right. And that's the only thing you can live with. I mean, I figured that because I destroyed a lot of equipment that they could, but I don't believe I pushed anything over the side that had U.S. Navy on it. It had U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force, Vietnamese Air Force, and Air America, which was the CIA bunch that was out there. So I didn't own any of them. The Navy didn't own any of them, and they arrived on my flight deck and they shut down And I didn't even tell them, they didn't even have permission to shut down. And there was just so many objects in the way and just get rid of them.
You just had to, and is it true that you had direct command not to let the Cessna land?
The admiral was covering his butt, but he issued an order to me to tell the airplane to ditch and that we would rescue. But the problem is there's only 2 people strapped in, and the rest of the people, she's either holding him or their kids in the back. And if they ditch, you're going to kill them all.
Yeah.
And since the airplane has fixed gear, it was going to flip over. So now you got them in the water, you got it upside down.
Everybody's drowning, you know.
Yeah.
Well, in that Sun and Fun air show where the major was honored for great feats in aviation, I found out that Mrs. Lee couldn't swim. And also found out that the major had no intentions of ditching the airplane. He was going to crash land it on board. And
no matter what.
no matter what.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that was my thought at the time was, look, if I don't give him a chance to land, he's got less than an hour of fuel. He doesn't have enough fuel to make it back to the beach. And so this is the only piece of what looks like land inside.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you know, if I put myself in his shoes, I mean, I was going to crash land it on board. And I figured it's a light airplane, and if I got the winds high enough, that he could probably get it stopped. He had to be a great aviator to think that he could go out here and do this one try, no practice, and also find another idiot out there that's going to say, "Okay, come on, I'll give you a shot." You know,
It's like, right. It was the perfect pairing, you could say.
Perfect pair.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you had to create the wind. So you had to sort of like not just push helicopters off, but you had to engineer that deck so that it created wind.
Yes.
Okay. That part of the story I had not heard. That's pretty incredible too.
Well, and chaos, and that's what it is. You know, we'd been up, I'd been up probably 40 hours. I'd sit in the big chair up there and fall asleep half the time. The Marine would pick me up, stand me up so that I would have a clear head.
Yeah.
And you just do what you got to do. I mean, I figured if I gave him a chance at it, that he could pull it off. The real problem for him was when I got high winds over the deck, then there's a downdraft after the ship and turbulence. And so he had to be a pretty good aviator to handle the airplane
The turbulence,
through the rough air and the downdraft. So,
but he did.
He did it. It's absolutely incredible that he had the presence to do it without panicking. And because, you know, in that kind of situation, you think it's all over. You don't know what an individual will do. And so in many crises, you wonder, can I predict which one of these people will stand up and do something fantastic? And it's usually somebody that you didn't imagine. And some of the big braggadocious thing, they're not it. It's some of those little guys around that sees a plan and go after it.
Absolutely.
And that's true of all military worldwide. And frankly, I don't blame him. He told his wife to get on and the kids to get on one of the airlifts going out of town. And so he was really surprised to find that his wife and his kids were waiting for him.
Oh my gosh.
When he got back. And so he didn't have a whole lot of options.
Absolutely.
He told her to leave and she did not leave. She said, she told the children, we are not leaving without Daddy. They're at that airport and watched all those other airplanes go.
Unbelievable. And he had to find a way out.
I think Mama's got more courage than all of them put together.
Oh, what a story.
She's an amazing woman.
When I had talked to Mrs. Chambers last time, she had mentioned a story about meeting them at the airport. Can you recall that?
Recall that.
So, but that's my story.
Okay.
we had been invited to go to Pensacola for the dedication of the bird dog. Bird dog had been taken to Pensacola for the Naval Air Museum. Yes. And so it was years while they did the things they did and found the right place for it, and
Find sponsors.
yes, and sponsors to have the money and so forth,
Mhm.
because you don't just take a piece of equipment and hang it up in a museum and say, all done. But so it was 1989,
Before
14
it was, yeah.
years, and we got this invitation to go. So we were going from Philadelphia, and the Lees were coming from Orlando, Florida. And the Naval Air Museum is in Pensacola, Florida. So you would think to fly from Orlando to Pensacola, you would just get in a plane and go zip, because it's a few hundred miles, no big thing. But that's not how it works. Everything in the South goes through Atlanta. And so they had to fly from Orlando to Atlanta, and from Atlanta to Pensacola. And we, of course, coming from Philadelphia, were flying from Philadelphia to Atlanta, and Atlanta to Pensacola. So as we were exiting our flight from Atlanta to Pensacola, up ahead of us in the jetway, Larry said, you know, I haven't seen Major Lee in 15 years, but I think maybe that couple up there ahead of us, that must be the Lees. He said, I want you to know that that man is the bravest man I ever knew. Got in an airplane, wasn't sure where there was any place to land, out in the middle of the ocean, flew out there with his whole family, not enough gas to get back, had never landed on an aircraft carrier. He did all those things and made a perfect landing. He is the bravest man I ever saw. So about that time, we are coming off the jetway, and all of a sudden, the lady turns around. Now, I've never met her. I don't know her. She doesn't know me. But she turns around and she runs backward to find us and throws her arms around me and hugs me. So I hug her. And she said, my husband said, your husband, bravest man he ever knew. So these two men, I cry every time I tell
that mutual
because
respect.
these two men respected each other. These two aviators were so in concert with their thinking and with their respect for each other.
Yeah, that's just so beautiful, right?
But that is what they said to their wives.
Yeah, absolutely. Neither of them giving themselves credit.
That's right.
Yeah. Credit goes to the guy in the cockpit. I'm just a landlord. I swept the runway and there it was for him.
Well, to him and his family, you were more than that. And I was telling Mrs. Chambers that she's like, not a lot of people know the story. I'm like, that's what I want to do. Like, more people should know this story. It's a I don't know the word popular, but it's a really well-known story within the Vietnamese community, because it really shows what it took to help all of us get out of the country that day, right? It took these acts of leadership, these acts of kindness, and this was one of the ones that we hear often about. So this is really a big deal for me to be talking to the both of you. So again, thank you for that. So just going back to that day, I said in the little video I made about the excitement of the crew once he landed. Can you go back to that day and tell me, like, where were you during that time? Once he landed, where were you? What was the feeling on the ship?
Where were you? Tell her where you were for the whole time.
The old guy is on the bridge in control of his ship where all the communications and everything. I was clapping. And frankly, I thought the crew was incredible. In order to clear the deck, you don't have to change anything, but there were a lot of stuff that went over the side. And in order to clear the runway.
And a lot of people.
And there were a whole lot of people on the flight deck. There are probably somewhere between 1,800 and 2,000 people on the flight deck helping to clear the area so that he could land. And all those people went up in what we call Vulture's Row, and that's the superstructure. And so you had all those people up there watching the show, and
it's like a balcony around the outside
Oh my
of
gosh.
the ship, about midway up.
Okay. And when you say all these people were pushing and then they were all in that row.
Then they went up there.
Then they went up to watch the show.
And that was one family you saved that day, right? One family out of thousands, because we talk about this part of the story, but the Midway was out there taking on these helicopters that were coming from the embassy, or where were they coming from?
They were coming. We had designated pickup points around Saigon.
Okay.
Plus the embassy, and so a huge number came out of the courtyard in the embassy, and then a huge number came from the various pickup points that the airplanes, that the helicopters knew where they were, and so the big H-53s, they were called Super Jolly Green Giants.
They belong to the Air Force.
They belong to the Air Force.
Yeah.
And those guys brought as many as 200 people. Nobody strapped in. They had cargo nets kind of to hold on to.
Yeah.
And the Hueys, which was the little bitty guys with the skids, they were designed to carry 10 Army or 10 Marine combat troops heavily armed for combat. And many of those came aboard with as many as 50 people on it, with luggage and kids. But remember, my guys were a lot bigger than your guys, so we were able to get more in the.
The thing you need to know is that when they were getting ready for the evacuation, they offloaded a lot of their fighter aircraft, their jet aircraft. They flew off and went somewhere.
Okay.
And the Air Force brought in a squadron of 10 of those Jolly Green Giants. So they belonged to him for that period of time.
Right.
So those were the official evacuation helicopters coming from Midway, going back and forth.
Okay. So even though they were the Air Force property, they were under your command at the time.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
They were assigned for that job. In the meantime, anybody could get their hands on any little helicopter was loading it up with people and coming out. So they were unofficial.
Yes.
And those are the helicopters, or some of the helicopters, that wound up in the water because they ran out of gas and they had no equipment to refuel them.
Yeah.
And the pilots were transferred either to other ships that were out there. There were about 25 ships out there. Or they went to Guam, or they went wherever. They were evacuated to somewhere else.
Yeah.
So there were no people to fly them, no gas in them, and they didn't belong to the Navy, and they certainly didn't belong to USS Midway.
So that helped you in terms of like not being able to keep track of how many went over, right? Like who knew where the came from?
Well, I didn't watch because I had received a direct order not to do it, and I wanted to be able to sit in front of my court martial and say, we pushed a few things over the side, and I don't know how many, and I didn't count them, and that's the truth, and I didn't look. So that if they could give me a lie detector test and realize that I'm telling the truth.
That's right.
I was just preparing for my defense.
You said that you had the 10 that were assigned to you. Did you expect what you saw? Was there any expectation there was going to be so many people?
I didn't think anybody was dumb enough to think that they not make a carrier landing in my life, and we do a lot of rehearsals before we ever make that first attempt. And they're going to go out there and some idiot's going to clear a runway. But
aside from Major Lee, did you expect all those little helicopters and all those thousands of people. That's what she's asking.
Yeah.
We were prepared. We figured the Air Force helicopters could haul up to 200 people each. And so if you got 10, that's 2,000 people. And if they make a second trip, that's 20,000 people. Now, it didn't turn, those numbers didn't generate, but that's the number that we were
prepared for.
And we were prepared for. And so, and this went on all through the night. So it wasn't like we did a few and then quit. You know, when you're in a crisis, you just do what the hell you think you can do, and
you don't stop to think about it a lot.
No, you don't worry about the cost. And all you worry about is take care of the people. And you know, even if I've been disciplined or what have you, I could always feel like, what? Tell me what your options were. I mean, I didn't have any other options, and so you do what you think is right. And if you don't have a moral compass, you shouldn't be in the business. The military is about breaking things and killing people, but it's also about doing the right thing. And I don't know, you start that training when you're at the Naval Academy, and all through your upbringing, and you just don't. You do what you think you can do with the resources you have at hand and the people you've got, and so you just give it a shot.
There's what a leadership lesson, right? And the fact that you're in the military where there is this hierarchy, you've been given a direct, indirect command to not do something, yet your moral compass was strong enough that there wasn't a choice for you. And you say that came from your Naval Academy experience to do the right thing.
Well, I think it came from my grandmother. I was a middle kid, and she thought I was bound for trouble. And I orchestrated the little kids and the older kids when we were all doing stuff, but my hands were always clean. But she figured out who the instigator was, and she was going to save my soul.
Amazing.
And so she made such an impression that when you're in the middle of a crisis, you know, grandma is still watching me, so I better do what the hell I think is right.
Did that actually come to mind? Like, did your grandma's voice actually come to mind for you in that moment?
I mean, remember, I always, her saying was, "I taught you better than that, boy." And you know, it's kind of hard to get those lessons out of your head.
Absolutely. Well,
when you're in a crisis, you just you do what looks like the right thing. You don't know whether it's the right thing. You don't know if this is going to be successful. You don't know if he's going to crash land or and what have you. So you just say, I give him the best chance that I can. And
if he had not been a good aviator, or if for some reason he had crashed and a fire had started, the admiral could always have said, "I gave him an order not to do that."
That's right.
It's all his fault, you see.
But that's a good leader, right? You were willing to take the risk.
He was willing to take the risk.
In a crisis,
he was going to do it anyway.
In a crisis, you do what the hell you think you need to do, and yeah, I expected to whatever acts that I did, I'll suffer the consequences of it. But when you're in the middle of chaos, you just do what you can. Sometimes you're real lucky, and sometimes it's a total disaster. You just don't know.
That's again such a great, powerful lesson in humanity and leadership. And okay, so I want to get back to the story about how. So more, I mean, again, we're not counting, but with your head turned, more equipment was pushed off after the initial ones.
A lot more equipment.
Okay.
And after they cleaned off all those helicopters the first time, 8 more helicopters came and landed right in the middle of the landing area. And the air boss said to him, well, now what? And he said, well, you know, they got to go. So
At that point.
well, those they had to count because everybody saw
Oh,
those.
Oh yeah. Okay. Got it. Everyone saw
There
those.
were 8, right?
Yes. So so after the 30 hours, right? We hear a lot about those 30 hours, the operation. After the 30 hours, what was the call to end the operation, and then what happened after that?
The real cause to in the operation was after Major Lee. That was about mid-afternoon. The American ambassador to Vietnam,
Graham Martin.
Mr. Graham Martin, and my Naval Academy roommate was the Commander-in-Chief Pacific's rep on the ambassador's staff. They were the last 2 people, plus his wife, and a couple of other senior people came out and landed. And I kept most of those people overnight. And the next day, I was able to ship them all over to Blue Ridge, which was the flagship for the admiral that was in charge of the operation.
Okay.
The admiral I had on board was my administrative boss, but he was nowhere near responsible for anything that was going on, except he's taking notes.
After Operation Frequent Wind was over, he was going to be his boss again. And when the time came to write fitness reports, he was the one who was going to write his fitness report.
Oh,
That's just the breaks.
that's
Well,
just the breaks. Yeah.
you know, he did get promoted to admiral.
Right. So that says something. So the ambassador was initially brought to the Midway to you.
He basically and a couple of the Marines that were the guards.
The final, yeah, the ones that
they were essentially the last people.
Yes, yeah, I've heard that story.
And then the whole embassy was overrun.
Yes,
yes, and the North Vietnamese were at the gate when those guys got out.
That's amazing. So just to recount that story a little bit, there was, Operation Frequent, 30 hours, the last helicopter, once it was announced over the radio that the ambassador had gotten out, that was the end. But there were 10 Marines left at the embassy, right? Yeah. So 10 Marines left at the embassy, no radio contact. How did people find them and get them to the Midway?
We knew that crew was there, and
okay.
So they sent a helicopter specifically looking for those guys.
And how long did that take?
And it had not been quite overrun yet, so they were able to get those guys off the roof.
Amazing.
We were taking them out of the courtyard because it was big enough for the helicopter to land, and the last few got out of Dodge.
From the rooftop.
On the roof of the embassy.
My goodness, what a harrowing time. And, again, being so young, looking back at the pictures, I cannot imagine the emotions.
Part is, there were so many people that we didn't get.
Yeah.
And the treatment
afterwards,
by the boys coming from up north was...
They wound up in the camps and they had horrible
yeah things. Well, that's why, like with my family, my dad was in the a lieutenant in the Air Force. So we lived on Tanzania Air Force Base, and it was bombed, but there were 2 planes left there, and we were able to get out on one as an intact family. My dad at first, he wanted to come home and get us and bring us to the embassy because that's what they were told to do. His car, for some reason, didn't work that day. It just wouldn't start.
Well, but by the time that he would have had the opportunity to go do it, there were so many people
overrun
around the embassy, it would have failed.
That's right.
There's no way he could have made it.
Yeah.
God kept that.
That's right. That's right. My parents have been always very faithful, religious, and so many little things needed to happen. So as tragic as like our family story is, having to flee, we feel so fortunate that we were able to get out as an intact family. Whereas looking back 50 years now, I really try to focus on stories about the amazing things that happened that day that allowed so many of us to be here today and contribute to our society, our community. So let's get back to the story about how that bird dog got from your ship to where it is now?
But the moment it landed and it was in one piece, we wanted to preserve it and send it to Pensacola, which is our museum of naval aviation. And at that time, my younger brother was I call him the horse holder for the chief of staff of the Army. He was the aide to the Army chief of staff, and I sent Andy. He was a colonel at that time. I sent Andy a note and says, "Hey, look, this airplane is in terrible shape. I know the Army doesn't want it, but it belongs to the Army. We'd like to just keep it and send it to the museum." And so he approached the chief and told the chief the story that the airplane wasn't in real good shape and all, and that the Navy wanted it. And it was only one of, and so they sent a note out from the Army that said the Navy could have the airplane. Well, I kind of lied a little bit. The airplane was in great shape, but I figured if I told them that the airplane was in good shape, that the Army would never
They
give
want
the
it
Navy
back.
a damn thing if it's in good shape. So anyway, my brother got the chief to send it. They sent us a note saying the Navy can have the airplane, and so we sent it to Pensacola.
Amazing.
That's how the bird wound up in Pensacola.
And then that was not the, the USS Midway, the April 29th, 30th was not the only time you rescued Vietnamese civilians.
Starting in March, people knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So in preparation, they were taking those airplanes.
They were evacuating at the time.
Those were airplanes that belonged to the U.S. government were on loan to Vietnam.
Well,
okay.
I'm not so sure
they were
exactly where the ownership landed, but when the people landed in Thailand at a Thai Navy air base, the Thai says, "Thank you very much." They landed on my soil. They're my airplanes, and our government said no. Those airplanes were on loan to the Vietnamese, and the U.S. still owned them. And while the two governments were arguing about who owned them, I was ordered to anchor off of in international waters just off of where that airfield was, and the Air Force was going to heavy lift them out and put them on my flight deck.
We're talking about over 100 airplanes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We're not talking about just a few airplanes. And we're talking about some pretty big airplanes too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a pretty major job to get those airplanes from one place to another without getting in and starting the engine and going down the runway and pulling back the stick and getting airborne. So, but the Air Force had what they call heavy lift helicopters. They can put a sling around the airplane and pick it up. And then they can fly along slowly and carefully and eventually set it down on the deck of an aircraft carrier.
Okay.
Now that's a dangerous operation because if a sling breaks, then of course you've got an airplane falling from pretty close quarters and smashing something. But okay, now that she can see the picture,
the visual, yeah.
Well, I was worried about this little operation because if one of the slings break and I got people on the flight deck, this is a hazardous operation. And while that was going on, there was a junk that was out there that saw us and decided to make a beeline for us.
A junk is a design of a boat. It's a type of boat.
Okay. And this was filled with people, I'm assuming. Yeah.
It had about 80 people. It had about 80 people on it, and it had a lift, and so it was probably taking all water, and so my instinct was, okay, let's I had a whole bunch of refugees that I didn't offload, and the plan was to take them to Guam, and a few more people going to Guam. I left 500 sailors ashore to take care of the airplanes we left in Subic. So we had bunk space up here. We had plenty of food. Look, we talk about little people. I'm talking about the difference between 5,000 19-year-olds, big, and that's a lot of groceries
That's right.
that we're consuming. So having a couple more bodies on board, uh, doctors, I've got dentists, I've got corpsmen.
So you had all the resources on board to
I-
take care of these people.
Yeah.
Yes.
An aircraft carrier is a small city.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no problem to take 80 more people.
Yeah.
But
But
Admiral Harris said, oh, no.
Well, the question was, I wanted to be as close to the beach as possible because the intent was to airlift these things out. And
mhm.
so, and at that time, international waters was 3 nautical miles.
3 miles,
And
not 12.
Today, it's
Well.
it's a lot more. But I put the hook as close to 3 miles as I could get it, but the ship swings with the tide and the winds. And sometimes I'm in international waters and sometimes I'm in tide waters, but technically my hook was just outside the 3 mile limit. So that's basically
That's
where
the point. Yeah.
I'm
Legally,
anchored.
that's where he is.
And the admiral was concerned that I wasn't in international waters, and therefore if I was in tide waters, then I didn't have to rescue the boat.
You couldn't
Yeah.
rescue them, right? You like if you're in high waters.
He could have, but he didn't have to.
The fact that I was preparing to, he had his navigator take around the bearings and decide that the ship wasn't all in international waters. And so I figured, well, the only thing to do now is because we expected to get underway almost immediately, you turn your main engines over at about 7 RPM an hour, and you got live steam on them, so it's hot and ready. So you can instantly have power if you need it. If you shut it down, then you've got the 12 to 14 hours or more that you have to gradually heat everything and get it ready. And there's sag. If it sets, so you warm it up and turn it very slowly, and it evens itself out again. And so all I did was I manned the forecastle, and I told the chief engineer to take the main engines off of the jacking gear, and then I twisted the ship and veer chain so that I'm well into international water. And so now I have to deal with the boat.
You arranged it so you could be in international
I
waters.
made damn sure I was in international waters so that I had to deal with it. 80 more people on board, it made no sense. When the day before, there were thousands of people coming.
So
Right.
he sent a damage control crew to
Repair the boat.
repair the boat. And pump out the water and patch whatever the problems were. And then they were going to put the people back on it.
Well, we examined them medically and fed everybody to make sure that there was going to be food, stuff back on the boat. And so I'm worried about these things coming out on these slings, and
Yeah.
They actually dropped 2 of the airplanes. They dropped one on the dock
Oh, so there was an accident, a couple
and
accidents.
one in the water, but not on
not on.
not in
Yeah.
Midway.
Right.
So they had a couple of mishaps.
Okay.
So
Already.
Every reason to be concerned.
Of course.
And so we brought. I was worried about these things coming out, and after a few hours, I called back to where they were working with the boat. We had brought the people on board, and I asked them what's going on, and they said the boat's taking on water faster than we can dewater it and repair it. I said, no skin off me. Just bring the people on board, take care of it. And the day before, nobody cared, but today we're gonna care. So anyway, while that little action was going on, I'm worried about these other things coming. And eventually, we got all the airplanes airlifted over. Some of them came out by barge, and I used my cranes to lift them aboard. And so we got about 100 airplanes on board that we recovered from the Thai Navy base. And now the two governments arguing about it, it doesn't make any difference because
You
they're
have
now
them. Yeah.
technically on U.S. soil, and I delivered them to Guam, and so that was it. But
Right.
in that load that I took to Guam was that little airplane that was going to the museum.
And there was a story that Mr. Chambers told me about a piece of wood that was presented to you.
What happened was when I was relieved of command, almost 2 years later,
When his normal tour
my tour was up, and I had been relieved, and they were having a little going away party for me, and they came up and they gave me
some presents.
They gave me that bell that's back over there,
Mm.
and then they told me a story and said, "Do you remember way back over there and that airplane, that junk was alongside?" And I said, "Yeah, you guys weren't good enough to go in and fix the boat." And then I sort of kind of hurt his feelings a little bit and says, "Fix it. We sank it." And I said, "Boy, I'm going to have you guys now because you disobeyed my orders." And they said, "You're no longer in command." And that was true. I was no longer in command.
Yeah.
So
So,
they sank the boat so the admiral would get off my butt.
and so that you can actually just bring these people on board as you knew you could and take care of them. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, and that's something like because my work is in leadership, right? And creative leadership and doing things differently and creatively. And that you're just like perfect example of it. And for your men to do something like that, knowing that, maybe in the moment you wouldn't have approved it, but knowing in their heart that you would be okay with it. Because again, you set the example of doing the right thing.
They did the right
They
thing.
did the right thing.
Yeah.
They saved 80 lives.
Absolutely.
And we're looking forward to meeting one of the people. You talk about being 2 years old. This woman was 2 years old and she was on that jump. And she came forward and identified herself recently. And she is going to be at the celebration on USS Midway. And we are looking forward to meeting her.
That's incredible.
I'm going to show her that picture.
Oh yeah, that's so wonderful. I mean, just like this 50-year anniversary really has gotten me because being here so young, similar to this woman, probably we were just American children, right? Growing up in America, hearing stories about the Vietnam War, hearing stories about the U.S. involvement, hearing stories about from my dad and my mom. But it was always like it was always outside of us, right? Because I was too young to remember any of it. But now being a lot older and being 50 years, like really going back and re-looking at these stories from a new lens, it really is. When you look back at that time, so much good was done in such a horrible situation.
The unfortunate part is that we tied half our hands behind us and didn't decide we wanted to end the war. I had a meeting in Hanoi afterwards, open up get the American
when he was no longer in the Navy.
Okay, so this is like well into the 80s now.
Yeah, but I knew that some of those guys had been military, and they knew that I was ex-military, and the first thing they said to me was, "You guys were stupid." And I said, "Oh boy, this meeting is not going well." And they said, "All you had to do was just bomb the damn dikes and the war is over." And I spent 2 hours explaining how we got targets to bomb. We were never able to pick a target out there. All the targets came from Washington. So there, we had one arm at least tied behind us when we went.
And then the targets were broadcast to the Swiss embassy by our State Department, who told the North Vietnamese.
And so they knew exactly where we were going to attack every time.
Because we didn't want to win, you understand? Because it wasn't a war.
We didn't. What we were trying to do was to reduce civilian casualties and give them an opportunity to to clear out, and all they did
It
was
was a fumble.
they moved all of their anti-aircraft stuff, their rockets and their guns, and so that every target we went after was very heavily defended.
And stories where such a powerful part of U.S. military history that shows what a leader should look like that needs to be told more often.
Well,
Yeah.
really the sad part is that if you're gonna go in, you're gonna fight a war, fight the war. I mean, don't go in with both hands tied behind you
Yeah.
and think you're gonna win. It
I
doesn't
know.
make any
Don't
sense.
go to war unless you intend to win it.
And that right there is a lesson itself in a individually personal way and as, you know,
Yeah.
as a country.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Don't
Well, thank
intend
you
to
so much.
win it, then find another way to deal with it.
All I can say is some of us are here long enough to tell the story.
Yeah.
And the thing that always bothered me about the whole thing was that was not my first tour in Vietnam. I had at least three tours before the final one, and it was politicians shouldn't run a war.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do a war, then let the
professionals
go
Right.
do the war.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No,
My goal, starting 5 years ago, my goal was to keep him alive and upright to make the 50th anniversary. And I'm about to have achieved my goal. I work twice as hard for all of these things because of what I have to write and all the details I have to handle and how much I have to yell at him. It's just exhausting.
no comment.
No comment. You're better off not making comments, I think. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time again. So I will see you at some point on Sunday. If I can get past probably over 3,000 people, I'll make it a point.
Lots of people.
Yes, lots of people. And again, thank you for today. This was really wonderful.